Good afternoon and welcome to a Friday edition of the PHLY Eagles Show. I'm Zach Berman. I'm going to be joined shortly by Devin Jackson from the Philadelphia Inquirer. And our topic today is going to be the NFL Draft. It is never too early to talk NFL Draft. We will be discussing the priority positions for the Eagles, the prospects to know at each position. We will be discussing Philadelphia native and LaSalle graduate, Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter, who's one of the top edge rushers in the draft. And frankly, this could even help you get prepared for the NCAA football 25 video game that's coming out next week. So I'm eager to speak to Devin about all of these topics. Before we get into it, just want to give everyone an update on some Eagles news or tangential Eagles news. You might remember Jake Rosenberg. Jake Rosenberg, the former Eagles executive. Jake was he left the team at the end of the after the draft, and he's in consulting now, and he joined University of Oklahoma as an advisor as they kind of go into this next stage of college football, this next era of college football. So you'll be paying close attention to Jake Rosenberg there. And I point this out too because Howie Roseman and Jalen Hurts both gave statements about Jake Rosenberg, speaking about kind of the relationship they had with him and how he can help the Sooners as they transition here to kind of the salary cap era of college football. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, the Sooners have some top prospects on their team as well, who we will get into. And joining me now in studio is Devin Jackson from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I was excited to have Devin on today's show because Devin knows well these draft prospects. People might say it's too soon to talk about this. Devin, first off, thanks for coming in.
Yeah, thanks for having me again, Zach. Sorry.
No,
I'm trying to catch my breath here, but no, it's always a great time to talk NFL draft prospects. Yeah. And this is a good time of year to do it. You know, NFL's we're kind of waiting and waiting for training camp to arrive. So it's always good to kind of get familiar with draft prospects as we're getting ready to ramp up the season. College football season will be here, and games will be played like a week or two before the NFL season starts. So it's good to get familiar with them.
So while you catch your breath, I'm just going to let the audience know here a kind of a little disclaimer. I understand it's premature. Like, this is going to evolve throughout the season. The players we talk about today, the way the board looks in January and February and March and April, it's going to be different, right? Like, that's the reality of it. We don't know how the NFL season is going to go. So we don't know what the context and the draft order, but kind of what teams' needs are going to be. I have a 3-round mock draft up now on allphly.com for our diehards that you can see. And my focus there was looking at kind of the position priorities that I expect the Eagles to do. The Eagles always look ahead. You know what contracts are coming up. You know what positions they emphasize, and it's based on some of the top prospects now. But what we're doing now is, frankly, it's what NFL teams are doing. They take the summer and kind of the late summer before the college football season starts to put their plan of attack, to know what schools they are going to kind of hit and emphasize, to kind of do these early draft boards. And it's a growing board, it's an evolving board, but the players we're discussing today, these are players that will be discussed in 32 NFL facilities around the country during these next few weeks and next few months. So we're going to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive tackle, interior offensive line, edge rusher, D tackle, linebacker, cornerback, and safety. We can always start with quarterbacks because those are kind of the sexy names. But the positions that I expect the Eagles to really prioritize are edge rusher, offensive tackle, potentially even tight end. So we'll kind of go heavy on that. And like I said at the top of the show, one of the top prospects in the draft, someone you've gotten to know fairly well here, Abdul Carter from Penn State, went to LaSalle. So we'll spend extra time on him. So let's start at the top with quarterbacks. We don't expect the Eagles to be heavy in the quarterback market, or at least high above it, but those are the premier names. Who's your favorite quarterback going into the college and draft season?
Yeah, this one's a tough one because I think this is going to be a class that you're kind of like, all right, do you want to bet on the sure things or do you want to bet on kind of the upside? Yep. But for me, it'll be Jalen Milroe from Alabama, I would say, is my favorite quarterback prospect, and mostly because you've seen how he grew up over the course of the
Sure.
season. At the beginning, it was kind of like a revolving door. Alabama wasn't quite sold on him. They kind of went back and forth at the quarterback position, but really on the back half of the season, he took over the quarterback position, and he's a dynamic runner. First and foremost, his arm is very live. He can hit all areas of the field, but I think he grew even more and more confident, especially in the deep ball area. The one play that kind of continues to stick in my mind is when he played against Auburn. That final drive that he had to give them the lead and the eventual win. It's I want to say it was like 4th and 30, and he threw a 32-yard touchdown pass. It's pretty much had to have it. He took a bad sack a couple plays before, but to show the resilience and then show the ability to hit his man in the back of the end zone. I think it was Isaiah Bond, who is now at Texas. It just showed me how fast he grew up over the course of the season. So I love Jalen Milroe's skill set. We've seen that type of quarterback really emerge. In the draft discussion, we saw Jaden Daniels this past class have, I wouldn't say a similar type of skill set, but the ability to run the football, be a dynamic runner. I think Jalen Milroe brings that. In the NFL, where you're looking to have that plus number against the defense, I think Jalen Milroe fits those characteristics.
Two quarterbacks who are sure to get a lot of attention will be Carson Beck at Georgia, Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. No short of attention for either player. Where do you stand on both those guys going into the season?
Yeah, I think they're both, for me personally, I have high second-round grades on them.
Okay.
I think they're guys right now that have really good baselines, but can they continue to elevate everything around them? And I think Shedeur did that a good bit at the beginning of the season, but as injuries started to pile up, obviously Travis Hunter, one of his biggest targets, got banged up over the course of the season. The offensive line wasn't great, and he was constantly under duress. You didn't really see the best version of Shedeur to close out the season, but you saw the body of the work the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season on a national scale and what he was able to do. So you kind of get a glimpse of what he can be. The accuracy is there, the ability, the touch downfield on long passes. But him navigating pressure, I think, is going to be the biggest question mark as he enters the season. Then Carson Beck is really kind of your prototypical accurate, move the chains type of quarterback. Really nice accuracy in between the numbers, and how he's able to push the ball down the field as well with his weapons at Georgia. But I think with him, are you getting a guy that maybe he's capped out on the ceiling? Like, is he just is what he is? In terms of who move the chains, kind of an every down player that is dependable, but is he going to elevate to a point where he's a superstar or he's the best player on the field? I don't think he's quite gotten there yet, which kind of, you want to see more, especially, in kind of his struggles against Alabama in the SEC championship game. So I want to see more from Beck and kind of take that next step. So I think both Sanders and Beck have certainly the skill set and the baseline to be really good quarterbacks at the NFL level, but are they going to be in that average area, or are they going to be in that very good to elite era? So I think right now they're both like really good college quarterbacks, but can they take that next step? I think it's going to be the biggest question mark.
And it's probably fair to say this is not a Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence type draft where you have almost that no doubt number one quarterback going into the season. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of where we are right now, and really is kind of choose your flavor. There's a few other guys that could be in the mix. Like I like Cam Ward's skill set down in Miami, but is he going to put it all together? Like the highs are really high with Ward, but the lows are not great. Day 3 quarterback type of player. So there's a big range of outcomes with him, and then several other quarterback prospects in this class.
In the chat, Tracer and Claire are saying the last position they want to think about for 2025 is quarterback. I get that. The first position they might want to think about is offensive tackle. And I say that because the Eagles, we know this, were quite interested in offensive tackles at the top of this year's draft. 6 went in the top 20. There wasn't kind of that no doubt player to take when they were on the board at 22. It kind of worked out that the corners fell for them. But Lane Johnson's not getting younger. This is a position of priority for the franchise, and it's a position where they continue to kind of look for that long-term replacement for Lane Johnson. So maybe it's Mekhi Becton, but if the Eagles go into next year's draft saying, all right, this is a premium position, we're looking for that player in the first round, who are your favorite offensive tackles in this draft?
Yeah, so I think the first couple of names that come to mind when people talk about tackles are Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks. Will Campbell being at LSU, Kelvin Banks at Texas. But Emory Jones, a right tackle from LSU, I think is a guy that I could see the Eagles really liking through this process. Big, strong player, stout, and we've really seen the Eagles kind of go after maybe a little bit heavier tackles, heavier guys, and I think Emory Jones kind of fits that moniker. Has strong physical hands, very physical in the run game, can move bodies, down the line of scrimmage. I just really love the tenacity and the nastiness that he plays with, and I think it goes hand in hand with what the Eagles do on the offensive line and how they like to use their tackles out in space. I think Emory Jones has those skill sets, and I think he's kind of flying a little bit under the radar just because his teammate Will Campbell is a big-time athlete, a big-time player, 5-star recruit. But I really like Emory Jones, and I remember when I was working at NOLA.com, I did a profile of him after he signed with LSU, and he plays exactly like he did in high school.
Which is what?
Physical mauler, moving guys at the line of scrimmage, very physical in pass protection. So that part of his skill set is translated. And I guess the unique thing is, with these two particular LSU tackles is that they started as freshmen.
Yep.
You don't really see that anymore in college football. You kind of like guys develop and kind of maybe take that redshirt year before they're ready to play. But they were thrown right into the fire right away against some really talented SEC pass rushers. Think about Will Anderson, Dallas Turner at Alabama over the last 2 draft cycles, and they held their own against both of those guys.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Emory Jones. In today's mock draft on allphly.com, I had the Eagles taking him in the first round for the reasons you said. I think he fits kind of the range potentially that the Eagles might draft, but really the profile that the Eagles look at. He's a younger prospect, but with significant starting experience, like you said. Will Campbell, he gets a lot of the attention, right? And rightfully so. I don't think the Eagles would frankly hold the right tackle part against Emory Jones because they're probably drafting a right tackle. And I should say, too, J.C. Latham this year, top 10 pick, played right tackle at Alabama. It's kind of sometimes you hear, well, he hasn't proven himself on the left side, so a prospect might drop. But Emory Jones, if Campbell wasn't there, I think the discussion about Jones would be like a top 10, top 15 type player going into the season. So I'm glad you highlighted him. One other guy I want to ask you about, or it could even be 2 guys, like similar to LSU. Oregon has 2 standout offensive tackles. Josh Connerly Jr., he was a former top overall recruit there or top prospect there. He's their left tackle, really athletic. You've seen him catch passes in games, for instance. What are your view on those Oregon tackles, him and Cornelius, going into the season?
Yeah, I think they're both rock solid players. I have them both on what day 2 grades. I think they showed their ability to pass protect at a high level. You look at Oregon's offense last year and how much time Bo Nix had the time to throw and move downfield, and how stout they were, in keeping Bo Nix clean. I think they were both rock solid in pass protection. I think Connerly is probably the little bit of a better run blocker right now, but I think both those guys right now, I could see them, at least one of them sneaking in maybe the back half of the first round at this point. But I think, it's early to kind of try and slot these guys, but I think the Oregon duo is a solid pairing, and I think there are 2 guys to keep an eye on day 2 of the draft.
We don't need to spend too much time on the interior offensive line. It seems Tyler Booker from Alabama is the top player going into the draft season. Do you view it that way as well?
Yeah. I think he's a player that, again, you saw kind of grow up over the course of the season in Alabama. You know, I think the beautiful thing about what Alabama's been able to do, you know, obviously in the run with Nick Saban, but just even last year, you know, on paper, that team probably shouldn't have made the
Yeah.
college football playoff. But, you know, it was kind of a reloading year, and Booker was another guy that, you know, had some struggles earlier in the year, but you saw him pass off stunts a little bit better in the interior, be a nasty run blocker. To me, I think, you know, his game against Georgia in that SEC championship game was probably the best view of his skill set. You know, has an up and down game against Michigan. Their stout interior defensive line. I'm sure we'll talk about Mason Graham here in a bit, but yeah, I like Booker. I think he's the top guy in the interior right now, and I think right now you have Booker and kind of everyone else right now.
I want to get to the edge rushers. We're going to kind of bounce around here. Before we do, let me tell everyone about Rite Aid Refreshery. Because Rite Aid Refreshery, this line of beverages ranges from familiar family favorites to revitalizing better-for-you options. It's exclusively at Rite Aid. Products include their water is purified, spring, electrolyte, distilled, and alkaline bottled water. They also have flavored waters. You can get coconut water, which has less than 1% sugar and boosts a power-packed array of essential nutrients. Their single-serve iced tea, juice, and lemonade. My children had a lemonade stand last weekend. They could have just gone to Rite Aid and gotten the Refreshery drinks. Juices for a Crowd includes pineapple, cranberry, apple, strawberry lemonade, and many other flavors. And cold pressed juices crafted from 100% fruits and vegetables, organic, non-GMO, with no added sugars, preservatives, or artificial flavors. It's important to stay hydrated, especially during the summer months. Get refreshments delivered. Shop online at riteaid.com/shop for same-day delivery, or buy online, pick up in store with Refreshery products. I also want to tell everyone about Shady Rays. It's raining outside today, but if you go out this weekend, it might be pretty sunny, and you're going to want a high-quality polarized sunglasses that don't break the bank, and that's what Shady Rays delivers. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. They have 5 stars by over 300,000 people who've come and seen these world-class products that have durable frames, crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. I'm going with my kids to Hershey Park this weekend. I'm going to need good sunglasses, and they will be Shady Rays because they're quality sunglasses that don't break the bank. And if they ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it, because they have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you don't love your shades, exchange for a new pair or return worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. Head to shadyrays.com and use code PHLY for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. So I mentioned edge rushers, and we'll get to the skill spots, don't worry, but I really want to hit on kind of the spots that are sweet spots for the Eagles, the positional priorities, and of course, this has one of my favorite guys in the draft, Abdul Carter. So edge rusher, the Eagles, if you just look at their roster picture next year, they obviously have Bryce Huff in 2025. They have Nolan Smith in 2025. They drafted Alex Hunt. But Josh Sweat's entering a contract year for the Eagles. Brandon Graham, this is the last season of his storied career. And the other important part about edge rusher is it might be the strength of this draft, right? Is that last year was not a particularly good year for defensive players. You saw the run on offensive players early in the draft. I think when you look at next year's draft, you see a load of edge rushers. Some of the guys who might have been first-round players this year went back to college. So let's take a look. Who are the players who jumped to you? And let's hold the Abdul Carter conversation because we can go in depth on him next.
Yeah, I think the first name that kind of has been floating around right after the draft was James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. Long, athletic, just an absolute amazing athlete with an amazing first step. Several times over the course of the year, he's beating the snap count and is in the backfield immediately. There was a game or a play against Texas A&M where he beat the tackle out of his stance, and he was on top of Max Johnson, not Brad Johnson. I'm thinking about
his father's Brad Johnson.
His
yeah,
father's
it's all in the
Brad
family.
Johnson. but he got into the backfield immediately and forced him to throw the ball away. So Pierce is probably the first name that came to mind when you start. But to me, probably my favorite non-Abdul Carter edge rusher is probably Peyton.
Yeah, Patrick Payton from Florida
Patrick Payton.
State. Yep.
Patrick Payton from Florida State. I think
I'm impressed you're doing this without notes. I got my laptop in front of me. You're rattling this off. This is good.
Yeah, Patrick Payton from Florida State is a really, really talented loose edge rusher that, when you were watching Jared Verse, he kept making plays.
Yep.
And that, to me, that's always a good sign of a guy that could be a future star in the NFL. And I really think Patrick Payton has the good size, the length, the athleticism, and he's starting to kind of build that pass rush plan as well. He's not just a guy that's going to win with a speed rush or a long arm, but is able to use a swim move, work on the inside and outside path of offensive tackle. So he's really kind of emerged for me. He's a guy that I really like, but to me, Pierce is probably I won't say the consensus top edge, but
Yep.
a guy that a lot of people see is at the top. And then you got Michael Williams
Yep.
from Georgia. That is that ball of clay that you typically get from Georgia. Guy that has all the tools in the world, has all the athleticism in the world. Now is about can he put it together on a down-to-down basis. He started as an off-ball linebacker. He moved him to edge rusher, and he's kind of continued to over the course, of last season. Much like we talked about some of the Alabama guys, he got better and better as the year went on. Probably his best showing was against Florida State in that bowl game. Granted, Florida State had a lot of opt-outs, but for what Williams was able to do against Florida State and kind of put that statement and build that momentum going into next year was real fascinating.
It seemed like preparing for the show, I only need to watch Ohio State over and over again. Both their edge rushers seemed like first-round caliber players. JT Tuimalelo, I hope I pronounced it correctly. Sorry, JT, if I didn't. I remember him when he was the top prospect coming out of the Seattle area. And then Jack Sawyer. Both of those guys, JT in particular, could have come out last year, decided to stay. And I think if you're looking in like the 20s, that's probably a potential range for those two guys.
Yeah, Sawyer to me is probably, I won't say better overall, but probably the more consistent as a run defender and pass rusher. Like, what you're going to get from Sawyer down to down. But JT is more of the flashy, has a really devastating spin move, had a big game against Penn State and Olu Fashanu. Who went
Great
first
job
round.
with the pronunciation. Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, he had a great game against Olu, and but for him, it was again kind of like an up and down thing. Like there'll be games where he'll be dominant, like Penn State and Maryland, he was extremely dominant, and then games where you didn't see too much of him, like against Missouri in the bowl game, against Michigan to end the season. So I think it's really about for JT, for him to solidify himself as a first rounder, is show that he can be a really dominant force on every single snap, but also like kind of having that discipline, not just running upfield, but also redirecting and putting himself in position to make plays. I found too many times he wanted to win on that outside path, but you as an edge rusher, I know they're taught different things, but you want to still be in position to make the play, and I think. For him, it's about continuing to, not allow himself to get run out of the play.
It's 12:24, so we've spent 24 minutes here, and I teased it like 3-4 times. The thumbnail for today's show had Abdul Carter. People who've watched this show for a long time know I have a soft spot for Philly players. Even if I did not have a soft spot for Philly players, this guy's just awesome to watch. When you were here leading up to the draft, I asked you about him. You had a good piece in the Philadelphia Inquirer from his football camp here, and he's someone who I imagine going into the season, like the hype on him, if we have this conversation in December, will be far greater than it is now. So that's my preamble. This is the topic of conversation when you and I were messaging. I was excited to get into. Give me the Abdul Carter scoop. What do people need to know about Carter?
Well, I think with Carter, the first thing is that, he is only a junior. And I think it's kind of hard to believe when you like kind of watch and you talk to people that have watched Penn State and talk to people within the program. Like he came ready-made to play from day one. Now he wasn't a starter immediately, but they had packages for him early on, and they would put him, in kind of these blitz packages, alongside Chop Robinson and Adita Isaac and players of that nature, and really from there it's continued to progress where. It's been clear that he is at his best when he's going after the quarterback, especially on third downs. They tried him at off-ball linebacker, and to me, I think he can still be an off-ball linebacker if you want him to be. But I think the move to the edge rusher, and when talking to, I talked to his dad, this past weekend at his camp, and he told me that James Franklin wanted him as an edge rusher to begin with. But they stuck with him at linebacker the first 2 years because that's what he played in high school and what he was most comfortable with. But the move to edge rusher before the spring was Abdul Carter saying, "I want to move to edge rusher." So with Carter, you get an explosive player, a player that gets to the ball first wherever he's lined up. It could be opposite side of the field. The play could be going towards the sideline. He's always that first player there. And while he needs to kind of clean up and finish, I would say, at a more higher rate when he's in the backfield that constantly, I think the move to edge rusher is going to suit what he does, allow him to get after the quarterback on an every down basis and not just on third downs and on blitzes. It's going to allow him to show that explosiveness, that quick first step, and that ability to turn the corner on tackles. And I'm excited to see kind of his transition. I mean, he's a guy that came in college around 240, 245. He's almost up to 260. So he's really filling out his frame nicely. And he's really kind of different, I would say, from some of the Penn State pass rushers you've seen. Like you look at Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, they're more quick twitch, athletic guys not trying to take on blocks. But, with Carter's background as a linebacker, you have that ability to take on blocks and disengage at the line of scrimmage, and I really think he's going to thrive in that role.
Maybe it's just seeing number 11 and all the great number 11s I've seen, but when I was watching Penn State last year during the season and then leading up to the draft, I kept saying he was the best player on their defense. Like, even if he wasn't the highest profile, even if the snaps maybe not have been like at the level of like a Chop Robinson, but I thought down in, down out, like he was the best player on their defense.
Yeah, he just so last year I got to watch Penn State twice in person. And it wasn't like for any coverage or anything.
Yeah.
My girlfriend is a Penn State alum. We go to Penn State
Flex,
games
my
every year.
wife's a Penn State alum, so you and I are thinking similarly there. Yeah.
Yeah, so we went to the Illinois game last year because we were around that area, and it was at Illinois. And he had an interception in that game, but every play he was in the backfield. Every play he was beating guys to the spot, beating offensive linemen at the second level. And then again against Michigan, he forced a fumble. I want to say on the second or third drive of the game. And he's just everywhere. Every time you watch Penn State, it's like, oh, wow, who's this number 11?
Mm-hmm.
And just like, it's kind of crazy to see, like, he gets a lot of comparisons to Micah Parsons. I do think they're a bit of a different players, but I mean, he's worked out with Parsons this summer. And it's clear like his trajectory is very similar to Parsons, though Parsons only played one full year at Penn State. But every time you watch Penn State, you can't get your eyes off of him, and seeing him come off the edge, I think, is not only going to maximize his Penn State defense, but he could really have a big year and catapult himself into a top 10, 15 discussion.
And from the Philly perspective, Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, of course, we recall Kyle Pitts a few years ago. Philly's produced like top of the draft players, and I think Abdul Carter has the potential to be one of those guys who's a top 10, top 15 pick. I should say, by the way, the chat's loving your shirt right now.
Thanks.
There's people who are listening who can't see it, but for the YouTube viewers, they're enjoying that Monday Night Football shirt.
Yeah, it's a nice little homage to what it what it was in the early 2000s. Got on eBay a couple years ago, and I love pulling it out when football season is near. So,
well, the crowd's enjoying it. I spoke about seeing number 11 in Penn State and just thinking he's good. Maybe I do the same thing with Michigan and 55, right? You think of like Brandon Graham, but then when you see literally 55 Graham, we're obviously transitioning over to defensive lineman now. You mentioned Mason Graham. Mason Graham, we saw it in the college football playoff, just like an awesome player. Who jumps out to you among the defensive linemen in this draft?
Yeah, it's definitely Graham at the top, but Deion Walker from Kentucky is just kind of
He is huge, by
yeah,
the way, like
he's
350 pounds. Yeah,
yeah,
he's like Jordan Davis-esque in terms of the athleticism.
yeah,
Right there.
but he's even more uniquely gifted, I would say, than Davis was even coming out. Like Walker, there was a lot of discussion with Davis, like, is he in shape? Is he going to be able to play a certain amount of snaps? You don't really have those concerns with Walker, even at probably a much bigger size than Davis. So Walker is just kind of like, he reminds me so much of Dontari Poe, back in the day. Fills up the gap, can rush the passer from the interior. They threw him out at edge rusher, and he still was able to get after the quarterback. To me, it's a 1-2 horse race between Graham and Walker right now in the interior defensive line class. But those two guys are just stellar athletes, guys that wreck the play, can wreck plays on every downs, pass rush upside. When you're looking for guys that are interior defensive linemen that can go in the first round, you need to have that pass rush prowess, and I think both of those guys possess that ability.
Sure, and then those are kind of my top names there. My question for you: you mentioned Williams, Michael Williams as an edge rusher. Do you see him more as an edge? Do you see him
Yeah, I
playing
think he's
inside? Okay.
a 3-4 outside backer.
Okay.
I think that fits him a little bit more. You allow him to drop in the coverage a little bit too, which the Eagles would really like in Vic Fangio's scheme. So I think he's a 3-4 outside backer.
We speak about the Eagles on the defensive line. Obviously, they spent 2 first-round picks in recent years on Jalen Carter and on Jordan Davis. We'll continue to see what type of player Jordan Davis is. Milton Williams, though, is entering the last year of his contract. This is a position where the Eagles kind of lack immediate depth, but it's a position that they'll watch. And I think there is some depth in this year's class, like one guy to watch. Maybe he as we said at the top of the show, draft grades are fluid. So maybe this guy pushes his way up. But on day 2, Walter Nolan, who's at Ole Miss now, was he was a transfer from Texas A&M, previous top recruit. So there's definitely a lot of guys there to pay attention to. Before we swing back to the skill players, I did want to ask you about off-ball linebackers because Abdul Carter is kind of my favorite story, Philly guy. My favorite just prospect in this draft is Harold Perkins. I said this yesterday. You said the Micah Parsons comparisons they might be kind of unfair for Carter, and I agree. Different styles of play. I think the Micah Parsons comparisons are fair for Harold Perkins because Parsons was an off-ball linebacker at Penn State, and he was kind of evaluated like that going into the draft. The Cowboys draft him as a linebacker, move him to edge rusher. If teams knew he could rush the quarterback like that, he would have been a top 5 pick. Right, Harold Perkins to me, obviously LSU's using him there as an off-ball backer. I've seen him rush the quarterback during these past 2 years. I think it's in his body, and I think he's just like the most unique, special player outside of Deion Walker in terms of unique. But I think he's someone who I just love watching him, and you put him on the field and he'll make plays.
Yeah, Harold Perkins has been an interesting kind of case study in what do you do with an athlete of his caliber? Like LSU, and you saw like early on, LSU wanted him strictly as like a inside backer where, he's just reading, diagnosing plays, and you could tell that wasn't really what his skill set lended to. So they put him more in like a versatile off-ball backer role, rushed him on third downs, and you saw the results. He's a really dynamic pass rusher, can win on that outside corner really, really excellently. And when you look at Perkins and what he's best at coming downhill and working downhill either as a pass rusher or in space. So I think with Perkins, it's going to be interesting, the discussion around him and how teams are going to value him. Would they make him a 3-4 outside backer? He's a little bit small at like 6'1", 215, 220. I believe he's listed at. Do you put him as more of a sandbacker role? Do you put him more in that Micah Parsons role that we just discussed? So I think the skill set and what he brings to the table is unquestioned. But I think now it's going to be about finding and slotting kind of his fit. Where exactly does he fit at the NFL level? What defenses does he fit with? I think that's going to be the big question with him. But I really like Perkins. He's a player that you turn on the tape. I mean, he's you're going to find him pretty quickly.
Yep.
You know, and I thought I should give him more credit as kind of an inside backer. He did a pretty good job in kind of getting the passing lanes too and on passing down. So I don't think it's completely lost on him being a interior backer, but I do think him as an off ball is more kind of versatile role. I think fits him more.
I recall Mike Mayock used to do these marathon draft teleconferences where he wouldn't have notes. He would just kind of be sitting there and like he would just take questions all over the place on every player for hours upon hours and just rattle it off. That's what you're doing here. I'm so impressed by the fact that you have no notes and I'm going like I haven't prepped you for what players I'm asking you about. And you got examples from games, examples from seasons. That's awesome here. The Eagles with linebacker, fans are always clamoring for that. It will likely continue to be a need next off season. We'll see what happens with Devin White this year, but he's on a one-year deal. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is a player they're developing. We got to. I mean, Nakobe Dean hasn't proven himself yet. I don't think the Eagles are going to kind of swim in the expensive waters, if you will, at linebacker. That's just not their organizational philosophy. Outside of Perkins, it seems the linebacker getting the most attention is Barrett Carter, Jeremiah Trotter Jr.'s former running mate at Clemson. He came back this year. Would you say he's like the other first-round caliber linebacker in this draft?
Yeah, I would say he would. I think Smile Mondon as
from
well
Georgia.
from Georgia too.
Yep.
Someone in that discussion, but yeah, Carter. I think I should say Barrett Carter because since we've been talking about Abdul Carter so much,
Yep.
but Barrett Carter. When you kind of look back at kind of Clemson, you watch Clemson's tape. Is that tandem him and Jeremiah Trotter Jr. working together, and it was almost like kind of a yin and yang effect. Like Trotter was more of the stout, will make the play, be there. Carter's more of the flashy, all over the place, can cover, can defend, can move out in space, can rush the quarterback. He's kind of more of that modern linebacker type that you look for in the early rounds in Barrett Carter. I think, his best football came over the last stretch of the season. I think the bowl game against Kentucky is probably the kind of the top game for him that last season. But even against Florida State, he made some big plays and some of Clemson's other big matchups over the course of the season. North Carolina, another game that he played really well against a really top, a really good running back in Omari Hampton that we'll probably talk about and touch on at the running back position in the 2025 class. But Barrett Carter, I think, when you look at the two between him and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., I think Carter is the better athlete, a guy that's probably going to go much higher than the draft. But I do think he needs to clean up his tackling a little bit in open space. I think that was kind of the big thing that I was looking at as like, all right, again, it's kind of same thing with Abdul Carter. Like you were there to make the play, like just you need to make the play at a higher clip, more consistently. So I think Barrett Carter can improve upon that as well.
We focused on the big body guys. We're kind of saving these skill players and the secondary for dessert here because that's going to be the last third of the show. We're going to have fun discussing them. Before we do, I want to tell everyone about Game Time. And I'm not just sitting here reading an ad about Game Time. I'm a user of Game Time. I'm going to a game with my son this weekend with tickets purchased on Game Time. And the reason that I feel so strongly about Game Time is that they have killer last-minute deals, or you can get tickets ahead of time like I did on Game Time, all-in prices, which I love. I never like when you see a price, you get excited, you go to checkout, and then it's X% more, right? They have the all-in prices. Views from your seats. I'm going to a ballpark I don't typically go to. I'm going to Baltimore this weekend to see a game, and I want to know what the view is going to look like. And so that helps you there. And they have the lowest price guarantee with where they take the guesswork out of buying tickets. I mentioned the last-minute tickets. I like the flash deals and the zone deals that they have. Easy to find and buy MLB tickets for every kind of event in your area. Views from all seats in the venue. Lowest price guarantee, like I said. Also, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, and more. And by the way, it's not just for baseball. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports concerts, comedy, and theater. You can save even more with exclusive in-app deals or select seats ahead of the game or event. Those zone deals, the all-in pricing, like I mentioned, the seat views, where they get panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee with game time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I also want to tell you about all our great coverage on allphly.com. I am obviously partial to it. We have a mock draft up now for the Eagles. We've had coverage all week on the Eagles. I have a number of stories planned next week, but the thing is, you're not just coming to allphly.com for the Eagles coverage. You're going for the Phillies coverage. You're going for our outstanding Sixers coverage. Your team is out in Vegas now for Summer League for the U.S. trials. I read a great Embiid story this week by Derek Bodner. Our Flyers coverage is comprehensive, everything you need to know about the team going into next season. And when you're a diehard member, you don't just get the premium written content, which is awesome. You get the members-only Discord. I was on it today, where you're part of the PHLY Lounge. I asked everyone what they want to know about the draft class. They mentioned Abdul Carter. They mentioned the tight ends. You also get a free shirt when you become a member and 20% off events, like we have this great golf event this weekend. People always ask me how you can support PHLY. Well, the best way to do it, in addition to watching our shows, is becoming a diehard member at allphly.com, where you join the best sports fans in the city. So I teased it, Devin. Let's get to it. These skill position players on offense. You mentioned running back. I don't think the Eagles are going to be high in the running back draft class. They have Saquon at least for 2 seasons, it seems like. But you always need to kind of be thinking about roster planning. This is an eventual need for the Eagles, and there are some interesting running backs in this class. Who jumps out to you?
Yeah, Jaden Ott to me is kind of the interesting one. Like
From Cal, right?
Yeah, from Cal. Ollie Gordon too, which I'll get to him in a minute. But Jaden Ott is more of a taller back, and we kind of seen taller backs, kind of, go either way. Like they've either panned out really good careers in NFL or have really short careers.
Yep.
But I think with Ott, like he doesn't run as high as some of those guys that have come before him that are a bit of a taller running back. But he's so explosive. His ability to get downhill, hit the hole quickly, and get to the second and third level and make guys miss in the open field makes him incredibly fun to watch. He kind of carried that Cal offense on his shoulders. And I remember watching him against USC and just breaking long run after long run. And granted, USC's defense wasn't necessarily great in the Pac-12, but they knew the ball was going to him. He still found ways to find creases and hit the hole and make things happen. So I would say that probably the most intriguing running back is probably Ott because of his size. And you typically don't see guys that tall, be able to be that explosive and, not run as high through the hole.
And so he's your favorite player there. You mentioned a few other guys, and you can get to them. I did want to ask you though about Junkins, the transfer from Ole Miss to Ohio State, and then Sanders, the transfer from Arkansas to South Carolina.
Yeah, I'll start with Sanders because I think he is much better than people think. He just was banged up last year.
Sure.
But the year before, he was tremendous. He's a former receiver in high school. I actually know his high school coach because he used to coach me in college.
Really?
So
look at that.
So that
All right,
was
you got the inside
there.
scoop here. I like that.
So he told me about they call him Rocket Sanders, but Raheem Sanders. He started a receiver in high school. They wanted him at running back because they wanted him to get the ball. At Arkansas, he's gained probably like 15, 20 pounds since high school to kind of fill out his frame. But the receiving profile is there already because he has a background as a receiver. But he's just a really tough, stout runner. I don't think he's a guy that is going to really top out and be kind of that explosive runaway type of player. but as a guy like that can keep the chains moving, that can offer receiving upside out of the backfield.
242 pounds. He's huge.
Yeah, I mean, he's like a bowling ball out
Yep.
there. But he's very physical and such a dynamic player. And you know, unfortunately, was banged up last year, missed the final 6 games of the season, I believe. So he didn't really get to showcase truly his skill set. But at South Carolina, I'm excited how they use him. They've used kind of those types of players really interestingly at South Carolina. I think about Jaheim Bell,
Yep.
who ended up going to Florida State and then get drafted, I think, 7th round by the Patriots this past class. Debo Samuel, obviously, too. So I think he has that type of usage where you can move him around a little bit. Probably don't want him running routes every down, but if you can line him up with a linebacker, I think he can win that matchup.
And we know he's well coached.
Yeah, well coached. I would be remiss not to say that. I'm sure my former coach out there is probably like, yes,
there we go.
Sanders.
And then Judkins, who it's Quinshon Judkins, was a really productive player at Ole Miss. I thought he was the best back in the SEC. Transfers to Ohio State, a roster that's like a pro team this year. Is he up there for top backs in the draft?
Yeah, he's certainly in discussion. I think the big thing with him is how much receiving of a receiving profile are you getting from him? You know, like Ole Miss had kind of that such dynamic offense. They didn't really need to involve him in the passing game as much. You know, I also think about like pass protection wise. I want to see him kind of improve in that area. But as a runner, you know, as a guy that, you know, bounces off people, you know, that can make guys miss in the open field, that has some bursts in open field too. I think he's certainly in the discussion. Is going to form a nice two-headed monster duo at Ohio State with Travion Henderson.
You mentioned Ollie Gordon. That was if you want to hit on Gordon quickly, and then we'll get to wide receivers.
Yeah, Ollie Gordon. You know, another guy that it kind of reminds me a little bit of LaShawn McCoy.
That's a good comparison. It's actually it's Shady's birthday today, I believe. So happy birthday to Shady.
Birthday.
Yeah.
But he reminds me of kind of the movements of LaShawn McCoy in the open field, where it looks like he's like crossing over people in the open field and making them miss. So to me, he's probably the most elusive back, I would say, in this draft class. Ollie Gordon is, and how he's able to you know, hit the gas in the second and third level and just go. So I really like what he brings. And I think he's a guy we're going to have to kind of wait and see. I know he's, you know, he had kind of a DUI pop up over the last week. So we'll see how that shakes out. But I think he, on the field, he's a really good player and will complement an offense nicely.
At wide receiver, the Eagles, they obviously have their top 2 guys entrenched. Wide receiver 3, it remains a question this year and beyond this season. They drafted, obviously, Anais Smith in the 5th round, Johnny Wilson in the 6th round. But this is a team that has not taken receiver in the top 3 rounds since making that A.J. Brown trade, right? Well, they haven't drafted one since Devontae Smith. And there was that period of time there when they had Devontae, Jalen Reagor, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. So maybe more youth in that room is coming. My favorite receiver in this draft class is Luther Burden. He doesn't have the size that I look for, but he's productive all day long. Who jumps out to you?
Yeah, Burden is probably my top receiver going
into
this
And he's
class.
From Missouri, by the way.
Yep. Yeah, from Missouri. He's probably my top receiver going in this class. And just another guy, again, that, you know, you're watching other people on tape, like watching Darius Robinson's tape last year at Missouri. And then you flip on the offensive side of the ball and you see what Luther Burden can do in open field. You know, the LSU game was incredibly dynamic in his ability to catch the football and make people miss in the open field. They throw swing passes out to him. You know, they throw the ball over the middle of the field. You can win vertically. So you have all 3 areas covered with him. The yak ability, that's always a big player for first-round receivers. So despite the size, I think NFL teams have kind of started to come around on, like, okay, like the size isn't as big of an issue as long as you're a dynamic player and can impact all 3 levels. So Burden is probably at the top. I mentioned Isaiah Bond earlier in the show, talking about Jalen Milroe, but Bond now at Texas. I think he's going to kind of slide seamlessly into that Xavier Worthy role and the ability to stretch the field with Quinn Ewers. who we didn't even mention.
Yeah,
But
he's
again,
up there as well.
that just shows how
Yep.
the how expansive this
Yep.
class is already. But yeah, so those are two guys that kind of stick out to me in the receiver class. I know there's a ton of others like Emeka Egbuka from Ohio
Yep.
State.
I like him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a really solid player. I think he's somewhere in between, like, we look at the Ohio State receivers recently. I think somewhere in between, like, Chris Olave type. Like, I think he kind of leans more towards
Nothing
that,
wrong with that. Yeah.
where he's a little bit
Just
more
smooth.
dependable,
Yeah.
smooth, not going to blow you away, but is very dependable at the point of the catch.
And then McMillan at Arizona gives you that size that's hard to find.
Yeah, another unique guy that runs routes like he's 5'11", like he's at 6'5", and he's very
I wouldn't know what
fluid.
that's like. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very fluid, just gets in and out, breaks cleanly, and again, provides that yak ability that the teams look for, especially at that size. I mean, he runs anywhere in the 4.4, 4.5 area. I mean, that's an automatic first rounder.
Tight end is a spot that in that mock draft that I mentioned, the 3 rounds that I have on allphly.com, I have the Eagles looking at tight end there. It's a position that they have not spent draft resources on other than Grant Calcaterra in recent years. Dallas Goedert he turns 30 in January. There's no guaranteed money on his contract beyond 2025. The Eagles have liked to, beyond 2024. The Eagles have liked to think ahead at this position. You saw that when they drafted Goddard. You saw that when they drafted Ertz. The tight end draft class this year, I didn't love it after Brock Bowers. If you look at the class coming up in 2025, it seems Colston Loveland is the top player. Would you agree there?
Yeah, Colston Loveland is probably the top guy, and really it's I think it's a close race, between him and a few other players. But
and by the way, Loveland's from Michigan. He's from the national champs last year.
Yeah, but you watch it. I mean, he was their best pass catcher last year. And you think about, they had a few guys drafted from that receiver room, but he immediately, was I mean, even as a freshman, he was making big time plays. I think of it, and I posted a clip earlier this summer. Where he had a touchdown catch as a freshman in the Big Ten championship game against Purdue, where he just went up and caught the ball over 2 players. So you have that ability, the size, the ability to stretch the seam, and you've just seen what the Eagles like to do with Goddard, and you can imagine what Colston could do, and an offense that was sure to feature tight ends with Kellen Moore. So Colston Loveland, is the top guy, but I think the guy that I'm looking forward to probably most, not even Oscar Delp, but I would look at Benjamin Eurosek.
Okay, from Georgia as well.
From Georgia as well. A guy that at Stanford was such a dynamic player, but Stanford's offense still kind of stuck in the past.
Not very good,
being a heavy run offense. He's not a guy that's going to be a big-time blocker either, but the receiving profile, his ability to make plays down the field, and just what he does after the catch too, I think is going to be so valuable. And I wouldn't be surprised if Eurosek kind of pops back onto radars, because I think he's being a little undervalued with what we saw with Oscar Delp.
Yeah, that's the player I like this year is Oscar Delp. Yeah,
he's a really good player, but I think Eurosek is going to be that guy that kind of emerges, while Delp, is going to get a lot of the attention, especially early in the season.
Do you think this is a good tight end class? Do you think it's mediocre? How would you evaluate that going into the year?
I would say it's a good tight end class.
Okay.
I also think about Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, that a guy that, you're watching Notre Dame, you're like, all right, who's this? Is this another tight end that they're going to go on and produce? One-handed catches, behind him. I would say he's probably, one of the more natural pass catchers, in this class, this potential class, when you're looking at the tight end class. But yeah, I think this is a really good class, probably better than what we've seen, and probably since 2023's class, which was really, really good. But this has a chance to have a few first rounders this year.
And shifting over to the other side of the ball, the Eagles spent their first round pick and their second round pick this year on a cornerback. So cornerback's not high on the list, but if it was, or if it were, there are some real good corners. Will Johnson from Michigan, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame, and then we can be talking about this as a wide receiver as well. Travis Hunter from Colorado, kind of one of the most high-profile players in college football. He's a highly rated player on both sides of the ball. What jumps out to you about this cornerback class?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the differences and kind of style in how they approach the game. Like Benjamin Morrison wants to kind of beat you up at the line of scrimmage, be a little bit more physical, really tight man coverage. But Notre Dame also plays quite a bit of zone as well. When you look at Hunter, though, I mean, that guy just is special.
Yep.
Like when you look at him and see what he does, like you don't even take into account that he played both sides of the ball last year, but simply as a corner, he baits quarterbacks. In zone coverage, he baits them, and man coverage, he baits them. Like he's extremely smart in how he's able to, coerce quarterbacks to throw his way and throw his side of the ball. And kind of his style kind of reminds me, I kind of go back. So, I was thinking about this yesterday, but I think about the class with Derek Stingley and
Sure. Sauce
Sauce
Gardner.
Gardner.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like we might get that type of
Interesting.
feel
Yeah.
in this class.
Top 5 guys. Yeah.
Where we get Stingley's more like Hunter's kind of style play in terms of like he wants to just take the ball away. He wants to lock down his side of the ball and just really dynamic, fluid, loose athlete. You look at Will Johnson, I think he fits a little bit more what Sauce Gardner is. I don't think he's as fluid as Travis Hunter is in and out breaks, but he is just sticky and there in your hip pocket. Obviously made a great interception when matched up with Marvin Harrison last year too. So I really think we're kind of setting ourselves up to get kind of a 2 or 3 person race within possibly the top 10 with Travis Hunter and Will Johnson and Benjamin Morrison too. I think he can make a claim as well.
And then at safety, you might see some early mock drafts, some way too early mocks that have the Eagles going with Malachi Starks from Georgia. The Eagles haven't really shown an inclination to taking early safeties, but this is a position, right? We'll see. Obviously, C.J. Gardner-Johnson's under contract, but if C.J. struggles this year, he's not the player they want. There's some flexibility there. Sidney Brown's coming back from injury. Reed Blankenship, they signed him to a new deal, but they'll kind of see what type of player he is. That's a long way of saying that safety's always a position they need to look at. Is Starks the clear top player here?
Yeah, I would say he's kind of separated himself with his play over the last 2 years, even dating back as a freshman. When you think about Georgia's like safeties and what they typically are, you typically see guys that are more versatile types that can play kind of the nickel and safety role. And while I think Starks can do that, he's really, I feel like, their first true safety that can play, center field, can go from one side of the field to the other and disrupt passes that can come down to the box and make plays when need to. So I think Malachi is probably the first guy like that we've seen over the last couple of years for Kirby Smart, where he's actually a true safety. Through and through, he's not a guy that you can just move around or need to move around. He's effective from the deep safety spot. But another guy that I really like in this class is Kevin Winston Jr. from Penn State. Has a nice size, nice build, more of a thumper, downhill thumper, a guy that wants to be physical and come down to the box and make plays, but showed some ball skills as well during the season and then during the spring game in April. He made some nice plays there as well.
The player who excites me to watch this year is Sonny Styles from Ohio State, just because of the size of the player. I think he's someone who can emerge up the draft board.
Yeah, he's going to be really good. And I look at the Ohio State secondary in general.
Yep.
They're going to be really good this year, getting returners back and really getting comfortable. But Sonny Styles is a really good player too.
This has been so much fun. I want to ask you, what's the life of I mean, you do more than being a draft analyst, but you cover the NFL draft for the Philadelphia Inquirer. What's like the life of a draft analyst like this time of year?
Yeah, it's kind of compiling notes, compiling players that are interesting, that you take note of. You want to watch all the top players that everyone's already discussing and kind of get a baseline of what the class will be. You kind of want to get the work kind of done early.
Sure.
So you watch kind of to the top guys. For me, like I watch like So I'll go out and like make a list of guys I want to watch, and like I'll kind of like pick them off one by one. Like in between, like I'll watch like some of the top players, like some of the top prospects. Go back and take a closer look in guys that maybe I watched out of the corner of my eye versus like as a true evaluation. So it's all about like kind of like whittling down those lists a little bit, kind of getting a feel like who you think are going to be the top names to watch. But then like during the season, even during the season, you know, it's kind of like checking in on
Sure.
those different players. So maybe like it's a few top offensive linemen, how they fare this week if they had, you know, some really good opponents coming up. You know, maybe it's the edge rusher class that you want to take a look at. So for me, like I kind of fine tuned it last year and where like, you know, I kind of got a late start in last summer just because like I was kind of burnt out from the coverage. But this year, like I started a little bit earlier so I can give myself some time to you know, watch, you know, 4 or 5 guys here and there, you know, kind of get the names and the notes that you have ready for them and just see if they match, you know, once the games actually start. But there's always other names that pops up. There's always those guys that you have like circled. Like I have a few guys circled. Like I want to see like, you know, they're draft eligible, but they're not necessarily seniors, so they
Sure.
don't have to go into the draft. So you always have that kind of differentiate that list so you don't like do all this work on a player and then he comes back to school. So it's really kind of a balancing act. And like, you know, I want to when I come and watch these players, I want to have kind of a fresh mindset and open mind. So like I'm not just, you know, seeing exactly what everyone else is seeing. Like I just try to I guess approach it with open mind.
2 topics from Rohit Verma I want to hit on real quickly. First off, are we sure, and we have Rohit in the chat, we appreciate this, are we sure Travis Hunter is not playing wide receiver in the NFL?
I will right now I would say probably he's a defensive back. Like I see the fascination with him playing receiver and I can see a possibility where that's an option, but I just think when you have a chance to get a lockdown potential top corner, like you don't pass on that versus like a guy like, yeah, maybe they end up using some packages for him later on, but I think right now he's a defensive back, you know, probably in most NFL front offices' minds, and I think that won't change.
And then the last one here, I mentioned this at the top of the show. NCAA 25 comes out next week. Are you excited? Like, are you going to be playing NCAA 25? Is this something that kind of gets your juices flowing as well?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun release. Actually, working on a story where I'm going to be playing with some Temple players.
Oh, that's
week.
awesome. Okay, well, we can find that on the Inquirer, in the Inquirer, right?
Yeah, so I'll be playing with some Temple players that
That's a
are
great
actually
story.
in the game.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, so I'm excited about that. So I will be playing a game and getting it personally too. You know, I really enjoyed NCAA football 14.
Yeah,
and been kind of waiting.
it's been a long time until college football 25 here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. So yeah, I'll be definitely playing. I think my first rebuild team is going to be Nebraska.
Okay. Because of Matt Rule, or just because you?
Yeah, like
Memorial Stadium.
Yeah,
you like the way it looks there.
Yeah, Memorial Stadium. The history that Nebraska has, and just what they've done, and when you kind of bring them back to that prominence, you know, I think it's a cool atmosphere that they have. Matt Rule, I think, is just a kind of the perfect coach to lead that program, and I mean, he's already getting the best out of them with far inferior players than he probably even has this year. And they have a young quarterback that they could be playing to, so it seems like it's all lining up for him.
I covered a game in Nebraska back in 2008. It was my first time there, and awesome place to see a game. But I just remember coming up from the locker room after the game, looking out, and you see this line of cars just like to the horizon. It was like from the Field of Dreams scene. I think it becomes the second biggest city in Nebraska on game days, just the stadium alone. Now, the cool thing is if you're playing college football 25 next week, you now know about like 50 names, right? Players who you might not have, you only knew tangentially or just knew their name, that Devin came in here, okay, fresh off parking, walks in, sits down, and just rattles it off. It wasn't like I was saying, I'm going to be asking you about Oscar Delp. It's not like I was going to be saying, tell me about Deion Walker. You were just rolling through it. So we appreciate it. Can you let everyone know where they can find your work right now and this coming season?
Yeah, so you can find me on X at reald_Jackson. All my work on the Inquirer.com. We'll see when I write that first draft piece. Right now it's kind of a dead time a little bit, and some football camps here and there are popping up, but yeah, you can find all of my work on the Inquirer.com. I do some draft work on the Substack as well. I did kind of went through the Edge draft class, and probably more towards like middle of August, I'll probably have like a top 20, top 25, top 50 prospects.
We appreciate Devin joining us today. If you tune in on Monday at noon, Les Bowen is going to be in this seat. I'll be with Les, and we'll be talking about Nick Sirianni. I have a story coming out Monday morning about Nick Sirianni with some thoughts of his entering a critical season, and there's some really good insight that I'm eager to share. Until then, thank you, Devin, for joining us. Thank you, Andrew, for producing, and we hope everyone has a great summer weekend. If Bo was here, he would say, as always, we love you. I would say, we'll do better tomorrow. We're not on tomorrow, so we'll do better on Monday. Until then, thank you for watching.
We all silly like the mayor.